welcome to the Black History Month conversation with Rochdale Alexis. I'd like to welcome my two guests, Dorothea Hodges and Christina Brooks-Abraham, and I'd like them to introduce themselves and tell us about who they are and what they do. Thank you. So Dorothea, let's start with you.
Good afternoon, Rochdale. So nice to be here with my god sister, Christina, and yourself. So my name is Dorothea Hodge. I was born and raised in Slough, first generation Anguillian, and I now live in London, and I have the honour and the privilege to have just been asked to represent my Anguilla in the UK in the EU. So that's who I am.
Welcome. Wonderful. Christina, introduce yourself, please.
Good afternoon, my two beautiful ladies. I'm Christina Brooks-Abraham, and born in Slough, still in Slough 54 years later. And born from two Anguillian parents, and they settled in Slough. So this is where I was brought up. This is the community that I know. I see myself as a community developer. I'm very active developing my community. So that's what I would say.
Well, thank you guys for joining me today, because I want to talk about Black History Month, what it means to us, what it means to you guys. And I also want to talk about this wonderful book that I've had the privilege of being able to look at. This happened to me. And I just really want to find out a bit more about the book, about your father who wrote the book, and obviously some of the people who contributed to it, one of them being Christina. So, Black History Month, guys, what does it mean to you, Dorothea?
Oh, that's a really deep question. So, for me, it's not just the color of my skin, it's the kind of legacy of my heritage. Yeah, and I think for me, it's not an accident that I live in London. That's part of the heritage that we have. It's not an accident that the two flags behind me are, one is a British flag and one is the Anguillian flag, because Anguilla is still a British territory. And that just speaks to the history, our history, so of being a displaced people. So we were transshipped from West Africa to the Caribbean to work as slaves. Our ancestors would have been slaves. And I feel very blessed that I know that my ancestors were 3/4 Senegalese, 1/4 Arab. So I know that much about my background. But it speaks to me, Black history speaks to me about that Black History Month speaks to me about that whole long heritage. And what is it Bob Marley says, if you know your history, then you'll know where you're coming from. For me, Black History Month is so much more. I've had the privilege to work in Africa, so a lot for the last 20 years. So I can understanding your history and the culture and the food and your heritage is all very important for people who were displaced people.
Thank you. Christina, Black History Month, what does it mean for you?
Well, I would start by saying that to be grateful that we're given a month, but to be honest, it makes no sense that there's something called Black History Month, because it should be every day. It should be something that is taught every day. Every day somebody has the right to express who they are. And unfortunately, due to, like what Dorothea said, due to the coming from a slave background, when we've been given the privilege, when those that have fought for this day, this month, we accept it as, okay, this is the month when we express ourselves. But in truth, I'm one of the ones that every day is Black History Day. Every day we should be creating a legacy and sharing our heritage. But I get on board in this month to, invite people to participate on a lifetime journey, not just for October, but throughout every day, 365 days of the year, we should be celebrating and advocating and speaking about our culture, our heritage, our history. And our history is not just a Black history, because we fit into the whole human family and the human history. So to me, it's a little bit like, yeah, okay, we've been given this month to express ourselves, but in the bigger part of things, yeah. So I hope that you understand. Yeah.
I do understand. I do understand. And it actually brings me to the subject of this wonderful book called This Happened to Me. Dorothea, would you like to tell me about the book, please?
Oh my goodness. Right. So how do you start? I'll start and then Christina she can finish. So the book is really a documentary of the life of the Anguillans in Slough. It was, the idea was my father's idea. So, and he had a really incredible history anyway. He was one of the first 5 people to come to Slough from Anguilla. And in that time, there were, Anguillans had a history of traveling outside of the island for work anyway. So he'd already, as a child, he was, had traveled to St. Martin aged 9 to work. He traveled to Santo Domingo aged 12 to work. And then he traveled to Aruba, to Curacao, to St. Kitts. And then in his 30s, he came to England. And he used to tell a story about how he came over. I can't remember the name of the boat actually now. It's terrible. But he came over on the boat. He came to Arsenal, where his brother was. And when he arrived in Arsenal, he said, "My spirit didn't take London." And he knew he had a family in Windsor, Old Windsor. And he ended up in Old Windsor, top and tail, they used to say, in bed, sharing the bed and working in the factories. And he really, I mean, I could tell his story because I've heard it so many times of the history of the story, but he really, really had, he'd kept that kind of old cultural, and I will refer to this a lot, African way of telling stories by passing on your history through telling stories. So he repeated and repeated and repeated his history until we all really, really, really knew his history. And that's a cultural thing. Really comes from Africa, because that's how people knew their history. So he was very determined. When my mother passed away in 1992, and she was a teacher in Slough. She was the first Black teacher in Slough. I think she was the first Black teacher in Berkshire. She was the first Black woman to go to her college in Oxford. You know, there was a series of firsts. Of her for my mother, and my father was really determined at that point to write the story, not only of her experience and his, but really the community, so that you capture the history of what happened with that community when they came into Slough. And you know what? Now I think that was really visionary, because he was really determined to do this. Like he had so much drive to get this done.
Amazing.
Yeah, so that's where the book came from, and it doesn't just capture his story, my mother's story. It really captures the community story. It's supposed to be a snapshot of the community story.
Thank you, Christina. You're featured in the book.
Yes. So
Tell me.
one of the things that Dorothea just said, I'm so excited that she said that, because my passion is storytelling. And at the time, I just always thought in school that I enjoyed English, I enjoyed composition and that sort of thing. But later on, I was told about my grandmother. I did meet my grandmother, my paternal grandmother. We call her Ma Killy, but she was an entertainer. She was the storyteller. She had a rum shop down in the valley. And she's a very interesting candidate, because she had people coming around the rum shop and she would be selling them, you know, the alcohol, but telling them stories which kept them entertained. She would dance, she would, you know, she was a comedian, so she would give people so much laughter, but also, you know, later on, I was that way as well. A lot of our family members are that way. At any party, you would see them being the center of that party in terms of their performing arts, their dance, or, you know, so storytelling is so important because you pass on the stories of the community, like what Dorothea said. So when Mr. Hodge valued me enough, valued my work, valued my contribution, because I was running a dance class and Mr. Hodge loved that dance class, he would support it. He would come and tell me how much he loved it. He would remind me that this gift was not just from my paternal grandmother, but also my paternal grandfather. He said that both of them were performers. My granddad used to do Makajumbi, which is a dance Caribbean people would be aware of. And he was the one, this senior gentleman was the one that told me so much of my bits that I didn't realize, because I knew my grandmother that was this way, but I never knew that about this quiet man that was my grandfather. So, you know, he said, I want your part to be written as well. I want you to write a piece for the book. So that's how I got involved in the book. And I told my story to a gentleman called Michael, who captured all of our stories, Michael Macmillan. And that's where It Happened to Me has come from. And I shared some of my childhood experiences. When I look back at the book now, I giggle. And I'm currently, as you both are aware, I'm in the process of writing my own book. So hopefully, watch out, future, just like Mr. Hodge was determined. And that gentleman left me, you know, he passed away in his 90s. And, you know, whenever I contacted him, whenever I went to visit him, he would give me a part of scripture to carry forward. And I have that message from him, which was Deuteronomy, you know, and he just told me to love the Lord thy God with all of my heart, mind and soul. And I do. And that was the funny thing, what I said about my grandmother, because she would sell her rum and then she would have her Bible and give praise and thank the Lord. So I believe that that's the kind of background that I come from. I'll be praying, and I'll also be enjoying my little bit of liquor to help me along the journey. Yeah, you know, and that's very much a part of our culture as well. You know, that's very much a part of our culture, our spiritual our religion, our spiritual aspect, and our culture in terms of loving music. Music actually, you know, communicates to our soul. You know, so it's an important part of our culture as well. Yeah.
Thank you. So Dorothea, tell me a bit about you're a representative for Anguilla now. So in terms of the community, there's a large Anguillan community in Slough. So tell me about how the two connect.
Oh, okay. So I just started again. So I had the privilege of doing this a long time ago, 2010. And Christina said that she's my god sister, and that's true, because we both were children of the Anguilla Improvement Association. So both sets of parents were on the committee of the Anguilla Improvement Association. And this was a community organization that really founded in the 50s and 60s when they came across to be like, it was a support system for one another. So they used to organize functions and dances, and then the funds that were raised, those funds would be sent home to improve Anguilla. That's why it was called the Anguilla Improvement Association, because Anguilla at that time didn't have proper running water, didn't have proper electricity. It was under a very difficult period in the 60s. And then, of course, if you know, they had the Anguilla Revolution towards the end of the 60s. And both sets of our parents were all involved in that and I only found this out recently from a kind of more local London perspective. So the committee organized protests. I think it was, there were people from the Black Panthers that attended. There's this wonderful picture of the protests in the 60s. And my father talked about how he ended up getting pushed into a corner on the fence on the protest from a policeman. And I understood my mother was the person who was writing all the letters for the community that went to the Foreign Office as the whole revolution unraveled. And then Anguilla got its status in I think it was 1981, as a British Overseas Territory, and it seceded from St. Kitts. So I say all of that to say that the history of the community has also been really tightly entwined with this whole representation. At one point, because where Slough is, any people coming from the Caribbean who had any kind of issues with the border patrol, with the borders, or their passports or their visas, they would be directed to, whether they're from Jamaica, Barbados, or wherever, they were directed to the Anguilla Improvement Association to support them, because we were the nearest association, Caribbean association, close to the airport. So I say all of this to say that there's always been a strong intertwinement of like a community and representing your community and campaigning for your community. And I'm a campaigner. That's right. I'm a political campaigner. That's my thing. And so that's kind of what the role is. The role is about campaigning and lobbying for your territory. And I am a fierce campaigner. I don't know if you'll remember that, but there was the hurricane that hit Anguilla a few years ago. It was my team and myself that decided we were going to fight to get the proper support. So that's what we do, that on behalf of the people of Anguilla. But also, I said at the beginning, before I think we were on camera, I said that my god sister Christina is really my sister in Slough, who is like linked into as a community activist, the network. And when my father was alive, I would be there. I'd be in Slough every weekend with my father. I was driving, you know, the film Driving Miss Daisy, that was my job. Drive him to whoever was sick or whoever needed, that was my job. So I was with the community. I'd see the community every weekend. But my sister Christina really is at the heart and the center of the community. And we decided the last time, and we're just starting up again, that Christina would be the person who would look after the community, because she's in Slough. She knows everybody. Everyone uses her as a reference point. So she is able to, and she intimately loves her community. And she's with them side by side, and she knows her community. She knows all the issues, and she's keen to make a difference, and she's keen to give them a different way of being. So when it wasn't Christina, everybody was missing her so much. And all the old people were saying, oh, it's not the same. It's not the same without her. So we do this as a dual thing. So I'm up in London, so I'll go and fight for the island. I shouldn't really say that. I'd go and advocate on behalf of the island. And my sister Christina is in the community, and she is there. And we do it as a dual thing. She's there fighting for the community, creating, supporting them, resourcing them, like being transformative to and bringing back overall. Between the two of us, I think we're trying to bring back that spirit that our parents had with the Anguilla Improvement Association. That's the spirit we're both bringing back.
So this brings me back to Christina. So Christina, community activist.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
So you need to tell me how I don't know. I mean, how do you do it? How do you do it?
So one of the
you
things,
cover so many areas.
One of the things that Dorothea said, and it's so funny because as we're speaking about this book, you know, I'm feeling so emotional. I'm feeling very, very emotional because the path has never been easy, you know, for those that walked before us. You know, when they were invited here, and Mr. Hodge would always say, I was invited here, you hear me? You hear me? And he would, you know, he would go and get the piece of paper, the letter from King George. You know who he be? He be Elizabeth father, right? And he would passionately show me the letter, you know, the invitation, and basically they were invited here to help to build up Britain after the Second World War. So when they were treated with hostility by the system, everyday people were surprised because it was something that they'd never seen. So we could excuse that, because if you've never seen something, then it's going to take time for you to get used to it. But the actual system that invited them never wanted them to be equal. So Mr. Hodge came with his dream. He wanted to make watches. He still had his watch set. Yeah, so he had been here for God knows how many years, and he still had his watch set. He brought out his watch set. He said, this was my dream. I come here to fix watches. You hear me? You hear me? And there's an interview, and I'm going, yes, all through it, because he's a person that wants you to acknowledge what he's saying. And he still had that watch set, because when he went up to the Labour Exchange that used to be up by the 3 Tons, and he said, look, I want to be a watchmaker. You know, they showed him a paper that said, black people can only be given menial jobs. So it didn't matter what level of education that they came from the Caribbean with. It didn't matter what dream or desire that they came from. The system said they could only do menial jobs. So the plight that our parents had in terms of equality for all, you know, the people who they were working with, they became friends with. You know, all of our parents have that English person or that Indian person or that Italian or whatever race that they became friends with. So we're not speaking about black rights just for nothing. We're speaking about a system that was never designed to treat us equally. And that goes back so far back in history. So our parents, they all came together, and I'm now part of, I have started to create the Slough Caribbean Forum. And one of the things, I'm going to send out so much love to Claude Brooks, rest in peace, because he's no longer here. But one of the things, he always had the Caribbean united. He wanted the Caribbean united. He wanted all of the little Caribbean groups. Let's come together and unite so that we could have one voice and make us strong. And that time, people, it was tried many times, but different islands had their different isms and schisms. So today in 2020, to be able to say that we have sat around the table, Rochdale being from Dominica, you know, there's people from St. Kitts, there's people from Jamaica, you know, and we are together as a Caribbean family. I feel like what Dorothea said, when our parents came and they used to be in one house, that house was made up of all different islands of the Caribbean in one house. And sometimes that house was a Jamaican's house, because like they used to work in America and they had money from the banana business. So they were able to come here and purchase homes. So those homes either belonged to Jamaicans or Indians. And that's the homes that the so-called Windrush generation lived in. And they developed relationships that our parents, Dorothea and my parents, they had relationships before us. You know, my mum made her mum my godmother. That's how much they loved each other. That's how much they trusted each other. So us two have the branches off of that root of that relationship. You know, and we have those kind of conversations where we're honest with each other. So like, you know, if I said, Dorothea, you need to, and I speak in dialect when me and Dorothea are speaking behind closed doors. And also, because Dorothea was grammar school educated, I wasn't, you know, and sometimes, you know, I used to look at Dorothea when we had distance and think, oh, she's posh. We can't judge a book by its cover, because Dorothea is well trained now on understanding that system that did not create equality. So when we put our two brains together, we have a whole unit in terms of creating balance back to our community, you know, and our people. So yeah, I'm very active and passionate. I'm very much in love with the color of the skin that I came here to this world to. And I'm in love with other people with other color skins as well. And I'm really about bringing the human family back in oneness. But I will not stand up for things that are against that. I will stand and watch that. I'm not going to run away. I wasn't born to. I will stand up in that thing and I will say, I have the right to be here. We have the right to be here. We have the right to be equal. So yeah, I would say that's pretty much sums up who I am.
Thank you. So now we are in Black History Month. So where are we going to go from here? You know, Black History Month is only a month, I know, but where are we going from here? Dorothea or Christina? I don't mind.
I mean, I think I'm going to jump in. I'm going to say that it is this year has been really seminal, I think, for me as a Black woman, because it is watching the young people get so angry around Black Lives Matter, and watching things like the statues come down, and knowing that that is finally going to change, but being part of this huge culture war that's going on in the UK. It's been a bit of a seminal moment. So some things are going forward, and the other things are going really badly backwards, like really, really badly backwards. And a lot of that has come from the speed of the internet and people understanding their heritage and their history in a way that I don't think was so clear before. So I think that I've got a very dear friend. I'm going to use it through her analogy because it's probably the best way to do it. She's Swedish. She's a musician. We've always had job envy. I would love to have been a musician. I'm not musical enough. She would love to have done politics. She's never really had a chance to do politics. She's white. And when the statue came down, she did a post, and she's a journalist as well, that said, I'm so glad that statue came down because there are things that I never knew about our history, and I think I know a lot. She said, I never knew that up until recently we were still paying slave owners, paying back the slave owners. She said, I didn't know the extent of how many British institutions funded and were based on the slave trade. She's a very knowledgeable person. There's been so much opening up now of this history that, and young people, because they've got access to social media now, and Google, and they can go off, and the internet is a real blessing because it serves us the information that we're looking for. Google Analytics and all those other things that I'm slightly suspicious of serve you everything that, so when you start looking through YouTube, it will keep serving you. People have learned so much about their history, both Black and white, in a way that people just didn't know before, because it's been tricky getting the slave trade on the curriculum. Yeah, so people don't understand the heritage of, why people are here. And young people, and I remember sitting down with some young Black guys and saying, Caribbean guys, and talking about, I said, listen, your ancestors survived being traipsed across Africa for months. They survived dysentery, being hosed down, and I've seen those castles in Ghana, being hosed down, sprayed with water, living in their own feces and urine on a boat, in a castle, then on a boat, and then they've survived for 300 years, being beaten and whipped. And you're here now. Yeah? So you have got something. There's some kind of gene that's been keeping you going. So you don't need to be fighting and scrapping. You need to be celebrating life. Yeah? Because you have come from something that has enabled your ancestors to survive to where you are today. And I think, again, I'm going to repeat Bob Marley, if you don't know your history and where you're coming from, when you understand that history, it changes everything. And for me, these next couple of years are got to be about people really understanding that heritage. It's just the most wonderful thing to see all of these organizations now saying, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. I'm glad. I'm delighted. And it's wonderful that people are talking now about bringing down statues, because, I mean, excuse me, why was a person who made his fortune basically on the backs of our ancestors, where people were being bodies are thrown over the side of ships when why is that still being celebrated in our central spaces? So I think a lot of things are going to change, but it's going to be very difficult, because now it's a history that not everybody knows. It's like the Irish history. People don't know the history, and history is very uncomfortable sometimes when you come face to face with what that history means, and then you've got to accept it, but also other people have got to accept it as well, and that's very, very hard. So I just say that from a bit of a context about, I think it's a seminal moment at the moment. I want to say something else as well, about, because Tina said something which really struck me and is so right. I have been lucky, and I really say that I was lucky because my father came into this country gripping a piece of paper that said, this man has served in the Anglican Church, and I endorse him to serve in any Anglican church in the UK. He took that bit of paper to the first Anglican church he came to, and because of the way the Anglican Church works, he was welcomed as the only Black person there and given a position to serve, which he did for nearly 50 years, carrying the cross in the church. And I say that because that opened him up into the establishment in the UK in a way that if he hadn't had that, I don't think, there's no way I could be who I am today. It was one of the women in the church who got him his first job. It was one of the women in the church who gave him the money for the house when he couldn't get a mortgage, because Black people couldn't get mortgages at that time. It was the same woman who picked up her phone or whatever she did, wrote a letter to Oxford to say, this young man has joined our church and his wife would like to come and study teaching to a friend. And they just popped her into the course, first Black woman at her college in Oxford, into the course. And my whole childhood was white privilege, because she was my godmother, and she was an upper middle class, exceptionally wealthy white woman who dragged this little Black girl to Windsor Castle, to all of these functions. So I already had an understanding of how that worked, because it had been inculcated into me. I didn't know. That's what's enabled me to navigate things in a way that if I hadn't had that, what are those signs and signifiers, and how you even sit down at a formal dinner. What kind of a formal dinner did we do where you were doing, eating from the outside in, and sherry and wine, and all of those signifiers help you to access. So I just wanted to say that I'm a product of luck. So, it's just luck. It's just luck that my father was in the church. It's just luck that brought the access. And you asked about where does that take us in terms of what does it mean for Black history? It is that bringing together the different races together to thoroughly understand their history, their joint history, and to be able to move forward, not as being Black or being white, but being human. Yeah, because at the end of the day, you cut our wrists, we all have red blood, our hearts are all the same. Yeah, it's a history that has changed us. So that's, for me, is where we need to go to in the future. I'm going to stop talking now.
That's amazing. Thank you. Christina.
Right, so I'm going to fundamentally disagree with my god sister with love. Yeah, because she said that her dad was luck. Going to church in the Caribbean was a choice. Yep. All of us are brought up with church in our childhood, and then it's your choice if you continue. Her father chose to continue to be in the church, and that created a pathway to something else. And one of the things, when you say, where are we going with Black history? I say we are choosing where we want to go with Black history. Because it's not Black history, as we both said, it is our history, and it is our human history collectively. So as I said, I'm one of the ones who are going to be looking at sending out our message each and every single day, 365 days a year. That's the choice that I'm making, and that's the program that I'm engaged on. But, we get a good audience at this time of year because people, they like to be dictated to. They like to be told, okay, it's Valentine's Day, show love on that day. I show love every single day. My email address is lovable. I'm lovable 365 days a year. So with everything, it's the choices that you make to be a particular way. And the choice that I make is like what Dorothea is saying, to bring equality in the true sense of the word, that we all understand where each other's coming from. We all understand the true perception. Because I think sometimes as well, it's one of the things that makes Black history difficult, when Dorothea said that it's been difficult to get it in the educational system. Sometimes, because I do a lot of work over the years in schools, a lot of the teachers say, I feel so bad. about what's happened. I feel, and it's going to make the children feel bad, and it's happened. It's happened. And we can't change that. But what we can change is how it's perceived and how the way that we teach it, the choices that we make to install a different reality moving forward. But to try and hide it under the cover because of guilt, oh, I feel so bad because of what our grandparents done. Oh, I feel so bad. What is that about? So we have to accept that what is and what was. We have no impact over our past, but we have a hell of a lot of impact and choices towards our future. So for me, I'm committing to creating a new future. I'm committing to helping people to, to have different choices. And when you guys spoke about this year, 2020, this has been like no other year. Never have I experienced a year like this, and not many have. And one of the things is that when you're looking at death in the face, and I think COVID-19, it made us look at death in the face. This virus that could kill us, you've got to wash your hands, you've got to do this, you've got to do that, you've got to do the other. So that, we were looking at death, and we know what Black people are like. When we look at those horror films, if you've ever been brave enough to watch horror films, because I don't like to watch them often, but I'm shouting at the television, behind the door, watch out, be careful. Yeah, so, we get on like that. So as soon as we heard COVID, all of us are scared in our house. We don't even want to go to the door. My grandchildren were knocking my door because they'd gone to the shop to get me groceries. I had the broomstick. And I said, don't come closer than this broomstick, They were like, Grandma. But it's our fear of death, our fear, and the way that we want to hold on to our life. That's something that 2020 has brought to the forefront. And to see a Black man, being killed on social media, like Dorothea said, the impact of social media, to see that death in your face, to see someone losing their breath in your face, it had such an impact on everybody. I wouldn't just say Black people, I would say anybody who's human with a heart. That was hard. It was hard because years gone by, we would hear of things, but you wouldn't necessarily see it. Social media allowed us to see it. It allowed us to see someone losing their life. So we have had to look death in the face this year. We've had to look death in the face. So I would say for Black History 2020, this is the first time that we're doing it in this way. And it's beautiful. Some of the things that have come out of COVID-19, the Zooms, the online, bringing together of people, that's been a good thing. But also, it's looking at the impact of death and taking responsibility for the consequence of death. So like Dorothea said, to young Black males who are killing each other, I said, brother, we have to stop this. To our Black women who are like, bitch, there's that, excuse me, whatever, words that they use, we have to stop that. We have to stop that kind of derogatory way of speaking to each other. We have to find another way and another choice. And as Dorothea said, we've come through a lot. We've come through a lot. And we have to celebrate what we've come through, and we have to create a future moving forward of carrying us into a new reality. So that's the kind of programs, Rochdale, that I'm going to be engaged with in anything that I do. But Dorothea's father made a choice to be in the church that opened the door to many places. As Black people, we have a choice. We have a choice to continue fighting each other and then blame the world, or we have a choice to actually come together and create a way forward. We have a choice. And we're exercising choice for 2020. We're choosing what direction that we want our life to go.
So as I'm coming to the conclusion of our session, what would you like your legacy to be going forward? We've heard Christina's. So what do we want for the future? For our young people, for our community?
I mean, I think Christina's an amazing model on this. I think I want our young people to feel proud of who they are, and to be able to have respect and honor and love for their fellow neighbors and understand and be part of community. And I think young people are going to forge a completely new way of being. When I saw those young people out on the streets, and it was, as my mother used to say, black, white, and indifferent, everybody was together. And I think the young people, this next generation, all these establishment things that we fought for the last generations, decades, I think that they are just falling away. This is the last flutters of something in its death throes. And I think the young people, with all their tech and their knowledge and idealism, are going to forge a completely different world, because they don't have time for us. And they think we've disappointed them. We're destroying their environment. We don't understand climate change. We don't care about. No, it's going to be a different world. And I'm just going to learn from. I'm very humble. I just learn from young people. They teach me so much.
Thank you, Christina. What would your passing final words be on this subject and their legacy?
I have the pleasure of I'm engaging with young people on a daily basis. So my thing has always been about young people. And do you know why I think that happened? Because as a young girl, I was remembering, because I'm going to be doing an interview on the Black women in Slough. So Lydia Simmons, Marcia Richardson, a few of the Black women, as well as Dorothea Hodge, because I know it hasn't been mentioned today, but she got an award for one of the top 100 women in Britain. So she's phenomenal in her field as a Black woman with a Black business, passionate about her Black self and her community. And, Dorothea is very humble with who she is and what she does. So for Black History Month, I'm writing about the Black women. But I, as a little child, holding my mum's hand, and she's walking, because she didn't drive, so we would walk all over Slough. When I think about where I walked from Chalvey, where I lived, and I'd walk all over to go and meet. My mum was having meetings with Lydia Simmons. My mum was very much active in the community, making sure that there were Saturday schools, making sure that there was provisions for the young people. So I was a little girl holding her hand. And then she would be involved in these folk songs. She had a beautiful alto voice, and they would be there practicing their Caribbean singing and their dancing. And I'd be just looking in admiration. And when I grow up, I just want to be so much like her. I had no idea that the good Lord was going to take her home at such a young age. I was 29 when my mum died, but I've created the same thing. So my girls walk with me and my grandchildren walk with us. And I'm already walking with the young, just like I was that young one walking with my mum. So I got to see firsthand as a little one when my mum was typing the minutes for the Anguilla Association, I had my typewriter. I was mimicking her and I was writing my stories. And now I've just seen that, because I was that one that trailed along, I am who I am. And I have loads trailing on behind me. And if you guys are fortunate enough to see the street dance, and you see my little princess warrior Kalia teaching, at 6 years old, teaching, and she can really instruct and break the moves down. And my little 2-year-old grandson, he can direct you on how to cha-cha-cha, with full confidence. So I believe that it's important to stay amongst the young, and I'm amongst them learning, and then I take my wisdom, I say, hang on, with what you guys have got, what about if you put this in? And we create something amazing, because it has the wisdom of the old with the vision of the young. And I think that's a recipe moving forward. So yeah, I'm gonna continue engaging with the young people. I'm gonna continue to keep my spirit young, and I'm gonna continue to. I think the most important investment that we have as any human being is our life, is our health. And sometimes we're so focused on, I got to work, I got to do this, I got to do that, but we're not working on ourselves. We're not developing ourselves. We're not investing in ourselves. And that's how you create legacies, by teaching people how to invest in their self. You've got to put into you. You've got to plant those seeds in yourself. So I'm definitely going to be, in contact with the young, but also going back to my elders like me and saying, look, Listen to what the young are saying. Listen, because that's important. My mum would always go back to the meetings and say, the young ones are saying this, the young ones are saying, because you have to have that bridge between both. We can't just build a community of youngers without the wisdom of the elders, and we can't just have the wisdom of the elders without the vision and the sight of the young. So it's the balance required between both.
Absolutely. So thank you, guys. Thank you so much for joining me in conversation. And I'm looking forward to our next podcast, because I can tell you there's a lot more for us to talk about in the next one. So thank you.
Rochdale, thank you.
Thank you.